Hi everyone, I'm Julia Litzko, MMC's Communications Assistant, and in this interview I'm talking to Hanh Nguyen, who works as mixed migration researcher in the MMC Asia team. Together we'll highlight some trends and developments from the latest quarterly mixed migration update, covering the first quarter of 2020 in Southern and Southeast Asia. Hi Han, thank you for being with me today.
Hello, Julia. Thank you for having me.
So to begin with, could you tell us a bit about the main takeaways from this quarterly mixed migration update?
Well, obviously, there are so many mixed migration developments in these first 3 months of 2020, but our main takeaway from this quarter is the new trends and new scopes of returns happening in different parts of Asia. In India, for example, with a new Citizenship Act passed in December last year, which specifies the exclusion of undocumented Muslim populations, there has been a fear of deportation and persecution among this group. And as a result, it led to reverse migration of Muslims to the countries of origin. And also in this quarter, COVID-19 really appeared as a new and a strong driver of returns across Asia. In Afghanistan, for instance, returns of Afghan migrants from Iran started to increase in January this year due to the US-Iran tension. However, with Iran became one of the COVID-19 epicenters, since March, about 200,000 Afghan migrants have crossed the border back to Afghanistan, which was, a very high number. And meanwhile, in Thailand, with a shutdown of business under COVID-19 crisis, migrants working in informal sector, mostly from Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar, have returned to their home countries with an estimated number of 60,000 people.
These are definitely significant developments. What would you say are some of the concerns regarding these return movements?
I think the biggest concern here is that these countries of origin are not ready to receive a large number of people in both normal situation and in this very abnormal period of the pandemic. From a health perspective, there's a lack of capacity to conduct large-scale testing of returnees. Let's take Afghanistan as an example. Only 600 out of 200,000 refugees and migrants have been tested for COVID-19 after crossing the border. And from the economic and social perspectives, I think it's even scarier. The question here is what will happen to these returnees after the quarantine period's over? Will they be able to find a job or even a place to stay in their home country?
That is a very important point.
Mm-hmm.
What about other mixed migration movements that you have observed this past quarter?
So besides returns, this quarter, we also observe the continued movements of certain groups of refugees and migrants across Asia, such as the continued secondary movements of Rohingya from Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh to Malaysia and Indonesia, especially women and girls for arranged marriage, and the continued displacement of ethnic Rakhine and Rohingya populations in Rakhine State of Myanmar, even after the International Court of Justice ruling.
I would also like to go back to the previous point that you already mentioned about COVID-19, which is also the thematic focus of your QMMU.
Yes.
What has been the main impact of the COVID-19 crisis on refugees and migrants in Asia?
Well, COVID-19 first potentially affects refugees and migrants in Asia as a global health crisis. We all know that refugee camps and immigration detention centers are not the place where people can practice hygiene measures, such as washing hands with soap under running water or social distancing. And the populations living in these kind of structures most often do not have access to protection equipments like masks and hand sanitizer, and also essential, medical assistance when they need it. And it makes them extremely vulnerable and dependent on the support of others, mostly civil society actors. And at the same time, the effect of COVID-19 really go beyond a global health crisis in the sense that in many parts of Asia, we observe job losses and destitution right at the beginning of the outbreak, which disproportionately affects migrant workers in informal sector. Also, resettlement plans have been postponed in many countries, and as a result, psychological impacts and fears are severe in refugee camps and detention centers, as those people already lack freedom of movement and liberty.
Yeah, as you mentioned, there are so many different aspects to this COVID-19 crisis. Are there any very key messages that you would like to share with the listeners?
Yeah, well, our message here is that COVID-19 is a risk multiplier. It means that it makes the poor poorer and the vulnerable more vulnerable. And with a specific regard to refugees and migrants, COVID-19 has the potential to exacerbate their fears, uncertainties, and vulnerability of this population. The good news is we also have seen good COVID-19 response from civil society actors across Asia. In Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, for example, a network of female volunteers have helped set up an isolation unit and educated refugee children about hygiene measures. And also in Malaysia, the UNHCR and Rohingya community leaders also stepped up to get refugees who potentially contracted the virus free testing. So those are the very good practice that the government and civil society actors should continue.
Yeah, it's nice to hear also about some positive initiatives taking place during this crisis. Do you have any expectations about how the situation might evolve during the next quarter?
Yeah, I think what we should keep in mind is that the situation is likely to continue in the next quarter or even beyond the next quarter. And therefore, COVID-19 crisis should be managed effectively, and migrants and refugees need to be integrated into the government response to the crisis.
So on this note, we hope you enjoyed this interview, and thank you very much, Han, for taking the time.
Thank you very much.
To read the full QMMU, go to mixedmigration.org. Similar updates are available across all 7 MMC regions.